Hope arrived in Redemption Creek looking tired, dusty, and plain, tragically plain. The townsfolk whispered, for a woman promised, to their proudest merchant. Clara stepped from the stagecoach into a furnace of judgment, her simple dress and weary face a stark insult to the vanity of Arthur Bailey, the man who'd sent for her sight unseen. He stood ready to cast her off, a public spectacle of scorn under the merciless western sun. But unseen in the shadows, a battle-scarred cowboy named Cole watched, his eyes missing nothing. He knew deserts could hide springs, and plain faces could mask unbreakable steel. They thought her rejection was the story. They were wrong. It was only the fuse being lit on a powder keg Arthur himself had filled, and the only ones who could possibly save them were the two people Redemption Creek had already decided weren't worth a second glance. The dust of Redemption Creek wasn't just dirt, it was judgment ground fine, coating everything in a film of reddish-brown disapproval. Clara felt it on her skin, tasted it on her lips as she clutched the worn carpet bag, holding her meager life. She traveled over 1,000 miles chasing a fragile hope, stability, partnership, maybe just a place to finally stop running from the ghosts of a failed farm and parents lost to fever. Arthur Bailey's letters, boasting of his mercantile, his standing, his desire for a respectable wife, had seemed like a lifeline. She'd sent back honesty, a plain photograph, a list of practical skills, mending, cooking, stretching $1 till it screamed, never pretending to a beauty she didn't possess. Maybe, she dared to hope, substance mattered more than surface out here. His mercantile dominated the main street, its polished windows reflecting a prosperity that felt alien amidst the weathered, sun-bleached reality of the town. Arthur himself was cut from the same cloth, tailored vest, gleaming boots, a mustache that seemed perpetually preened. He hadn't bothered to meet the stage, sending word he'd call at his convenience. The phrase had landed like a cold stone in her stomach. The small cabin at the edge of town, arranged sight unseen, was clean but stark. She spent the afternoon battling the dust, airing the single room, noting the cracked pane and loose hinge with a practical eye. These were familiar problems, solvable. Less solvable was the chill she felt from the few townsfolk she passed. Curious stares, pitying glances, quick whispers behind cupped hands. She kept her chin high, her gaze steady, years of quiet endurance schooling her features. She unpacked her mother's sewing notions, the feel of the familiar tin a small anchor. Resilience wasn't a choice. It was the air she breathed. She just needed the chance Arthur Bailey represented. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in harsh strokes of orange and purple, she saw him approach. He walked with the stiff importance of a man constantly assessing his own reflection, his gaze sweeping over the humble cabin with visible distaste. Before he even reached the door, he stopped short, his inspection of her thorough and completely devoid of warmth. Hope withered under that gaze. She knew, with a certainty that stole her breath, what was coming. His judgment was already written on his face. Arthur Bailey cleared his throat, a dry, dismissive sound. "Miss Clara," he began, the name an awkward fit in his mouth. No greeting, no offered hand, just distance and disdain. His eyes did another quick, brutal inventory. The travel-worn dress, the severely pinned hair, the face marked by prairie sun, not societal grace. "There appears," he stated, puffing his chest, "to have been a significant misunderstanding." "Mr. Bailey," Clara managed, her voice low but level. Inside, her stomach churned, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. He waved a hand airily. "The photograph, well, it failed to capture the reality. I require a wife, Miss Clara, who reflects my standing. Someone of refinement, poise, Frankie, someone less." He paused, searching for the word, ensuring maximum impact. "Plain." The word dropped into the sudden, expectant silence of the street. Nearby townsfolk froze, ears pricked, turning to watch the unfolding drama. The humiliation was a physical blow, hot and stinging. Her hands, hidden in her skirt, clenched into fists, knuckles white. "I had envisioned," Arthur continued, clearly enjoying his own magnanimity in delivering the verdict. "Someone who would be an asset, an ornament, if you will. While I commend your presumed domestic abilities, you simply do not meet the requirements for the position of my wife." He offered a thin, cruel smile. "You are unsuitable." The heat seemed to intensify, pressing down on her. She could feel the stares burning her back. "I understand," she whispered, the words costing her dearly. The formal mask of composure was all she had left. He nodded sharply, relieved at her lack of hysterics. "Excellent. Avoids unpleasantness. The cabin was merely temporary lodging, naturally. You'll need to make other arrangements. I expect you to vacate by week's end." He turned abruptly, dismissing her as easily as swatting a fly, eager to rejoin the world where his importance was recognized. Across the dusty expanse, leaning against a saloon post, Cole watched it all. He drifted in days before, a man wrapped in silence and scars, taking odd jobs, observing. He saw Bailey's preening arrogance, heard the casual cruelty. He saw the tremor Clara fought to hide, the flicker of deep pain in her eyes before the mask slammed down. He saw the rigid spine, the refusal to crumble under public shame. It was a strength Arthur Bailey, blinded by his own reflection, couldn't comprehend. As Bailey strutted off, leaving Clara isolated in the swirling dust and the town's collective judgment, Cole's expression remained unreadable, save for a tightening around his eyes. He knew cheap facades when he saw them, and he knew genuine grit. He pushed away from the post, melting back into the dim coolness of the saloon. But the image of the woman left standing alone remained etched in his mind. The rejection was brutal, public, and seemed absolute. But the story of Redemption Creek was far from over. A woman publicly scorned, labeled plain by the town's leading citizen, found few open doors in Redemption Creek. Clara woke the next morning to the weight of Arthur Bailey's pronouncement pressing down like the relentless sun. The small cabin felt like a cage. Leaving was impossible. No money for fare, nowhere to go back to. The farm was gone, family buried. This harsh, judgmental town was, paradoxically, her only ground to stand on. She sought work. Her quiet requests met with awkward refusals and pitying glances. Mrs. Gable at the bakery suddenly had no need for help. The hotel man mumbled about being fully staffed. Her presence was a discomfort, a reminder of Bailey's callousness, and siding with her felt like opposing him. Whispers trailed her like shadows. "Poor creature. Should have known her place. Serves Arthur right to want better." Only old Mrs. Albright, the preacher's widow living behind the church, offered a sliver of hope. Taking in laundry and mending was her meager living, and she grudgingly agreed to share the burden. Clara plunged into the back-breaking labor, scrubbing clothes against rough boards till her knuckles bled, stitching late into the night by flickering lamplight. The pay barely covered cornmeal and beans, but it was survival. It was dignity, earned with sweat and aching muscles. She spoke little, worked tirelessly, her focus absolute. Passing Bailey's mercantile required keeping her eyes fixed firmly on the dusty ground. Arthur, meanwhile, twisted the knife. He began courting Amelia Holloway, the land agent's pretty, visiting niece, with ostentatious displays. Amelia, all ribbons and rosy cheeks, was paraded down the main street on his arm. He bought her trinkets from his store, laughing loudly, ensuring Clara, and the entire town, witnessed his swift acquisition of a suitable replacement. Each public spectacle felt calculated, designed to underscore Clara's inadequacy. Through this daily gauntlet, Cole remained an enigmatic presence. He worked odd jobs, fixing tech, unloading freight, enough to keep his room above the saloon. He was a man of few words, his scarred face usually set in a brooding neutrality. Yet Clara felt his gaze. Sometimes, looking up from the steaming wash tub behind Mrs. Albright's, she'd find him leaning on a distant fence, ostensibly watching nothing, yet she knew he saw her. His look wasn't pitying, nor was it predatory. It was attentive, assessing. Then came the small, anonymous kindnesses. A stack of firewood, neatly cut, appeared by her cabin door one chill morning. The cracked window pane that rattled in the wind was silently replaced with a piece of salvaged, smooth glass. The loose cabin door hinge suddenly moved without a creak, freshly oiled. No one ever saw who did it. Yet Clara found her gaze drawn towards the saloon, towards Cole. He offered no sign, his face impassive. Still, she noticed things about him too. The way his eyes constantly scanned his surroundings, noting details others missed. A loose gun on a stranger's hip, the nervous tick of a card player. The way his hand instinctively rested near his worn peacemaker when tension rose. There was a coiled readiness beneath his quiet exterior, a hint of a past far removed from mending fences. Maybe, she thought, he understood what it meant to be judged solely on appearances. A fragile thread of awareness stretched between them, unseen by anyone else in the judgmental dust of Redemption Creek. Arthur Bailey's ambition, unchecked by caution or conscience, began to poison the town's wellspring. His pursuit of Amelia wasn't just about vanity. It was about access to her uncle, Mr. Harrison, the land agent. Arthur spun tales of potential fortunes in the surrounding territories, water rights, mineral deposits, schemes that required capital he didn't have. He needed Harrison's influence, Harrison's connections, to fund his courtship and speculative ventures. Arthur's mercantile became a trap. Goods quality dropped, prices soared. Credit was extended easily, then called in with crippling interest rates, squeezing the already hard-pressed townsfolk. Discontent simmered beneath the surface. Worse, whispers grew louder about Arthur's other sources of funding. Late-night visits from hard-eyed men who smelled of danger. Men who arrived and left like shadows. Men connected, it was rumored, to ruthless financiers or powerful gangs operating outside the thin reach of the law. Clara, immersed in her endless cycle of washing and mending, tried to remain oblivious. But the town's rising tension was unavoidable. Delivering mended overalls to the livery stable one afternoon, she passed the alley beside the saloon. Arthur Bailey's voice, usually so smooth, was tight with fear. "I just need more time," he pleaded. A low, gravelly voice replied, cold as a winter creek. "Time ran out, Bailey. Kincaid ain't patient. Next visit won't be polite." Clara hurried past, the menace in that unseen voice raising goosebumps on her arms. Arthur wasn't just courting Amelia. He was dancing with wolves. The strain showed on the town. Tempers frayed easily. Saloon brawls became more common. Strangers were eyed with deep suspicion. Then, one evening, the tension erupted onto the main street. Two rough-looking men, clearly the type associated with the gravelly voice Clara had overheard, confronted Arthur as he walked Amelia home from a church social. "Bailey." A word. One blocked their path, hand near his gun. Arthur blanched, attempting bravado. "I have no dealings with you. Stand aside." Amelia gasped, clinging to him. The second man smirked. "Oh, you got dealings, all right. Or you will have. Our employer sent us for a down payment." Before Arthur could dissolve into pleas, Cole stepped out of the shadows near the blacksmith's. He moved with a silent grace that was almost unnerving. He didn't draw, didn't shout. He simply placed himself between the thugs and the couple. "Gentlemen." His voice was quiet, yet it cut through the evening air. "The lady looks tired. Best let her pass." The thugs assessed Cole. The weathered clothes, the low-slung colt, the network of scars, the unnerving stillness in his pale eyes. Something gave them pause. "Stay out of this, Scarface." The first one growled, but the threat lacked conviction. Cole's gaze remained steady on them. Public disturbances, especially involving ladies, tend to attract unwanted attention. He shifted his weight almost imperceptibly, a movement that somehow radiated potential violence. "Might be better to discuss your business somewhere else." Or ride on. A thick silence hung in the air. The thugs exchanged looks. This wasn't part of their plan. They were collectors, Not gunmen looking for a shootout with a stranger who looked like he knew exactly how dangerous he could be. Muttering threats directed at Arthur, they reluctantly backed down, melting back towards the saloon's noise and shadows. Arthur, recovering quickly now the threat was gone, puffed out his chest. Disreputable characters. Lucky for them I showed restraint. He patted Amelia's arm, completely ignoring Cole. Cole watched the thugs retreat, a fleeting expression of utter contempt for Arthur crossing his scarred features before vanishing. He glanced towards Mrs. Albright's house, where Clara stood silhouetted in the doorway, having witnessed the entire exchange. A brief nod passed between them, not friendship, but a shared recognition of the escalating danger Arthur was drawing to them all. Cole hadn't intervened for Arthur. He'd acted to prevent chaos erupting on the street, chaos that could engulf innocents like Amelia. The wolves were no longer circling. They were testing defenses. The inevitable arrived not as a whisper, but as a thunderclap of hoofbeats and drawn guns. 3 riders, led by the obsidian-eyed Flint with his scarred eyebrow, rode into Redemption Creek with lethal intent. They bypassed pleasantries, kicking open the door of Bailey's Mercantile. Arthur, fussing over a display, yelped in terror. "Bailey." Flint's voice was flat, cold steel. "Collection time. For Boss Kincaid." I need more." Arthur stammered. Flint silenced him with a brutal backhand that sent him reeling against flour sacks. "No talk. Money. Now." His men covered the terrified customers and Amelia Holloway, who screamed as one grabbed her arm near the ribbon counter. "Or maybe," Flint sneered, eyeing Amelia, "we take payment in kind." Panic detonated on the street. Doors slammed, shutters banged closed. Sheriff Brody emerged, shotgun ready but looking frail against the threat. "Hold it right there. What's the meaning?" Flint laughed harshly. "Meaning your fancy merchant hero's a debt. Either he pays, or this town does. Starting with her." He nodded towards the whimpering Amelia. A single shot cracked the tension, not from Flint's men. It kicked dust near the man holding Amelia, making him instinctively flinch back. Confusion reigned. Then, one of Flint's men fired wildly towards the sheriff's office. A cry of pain followed as Brody staggered back, clutching a bleeding shoulder. Chaos ensued. Townsfolk scrambled for cover. Flint's men grew agitated, waving their guns. Arthur Bailey simply collapsed behind his counter, a useless heap of fear. Then Clara moved. She'd been near the sheriff's office. Seeing him fall, she didn't hesitate. Ignoring shouts to take cover, she ran to him, knelt in the dust, and tore strips from her own apron. "Hold still, Sheriff." Her voice, clear and commanding, cut through the rising panic. Her hands moved with a sureness that belied her simple appearance, assessing the wound, applying pressure. "Clean through the muscle," she murmured, her focus absolute. "Need to stop the bleeding." Townsfolk watched, stunned. Plain Clara, the reject, acting with more courage and skill than anyone. Where had she learned this? The faint memory of tending injured livestock, of helping her mother with poultices back on the farm, surfaced, skills born of harsh necessity. Simultaneously, Cole stepped out of the alley beside the saloon, Colt steady in his hand. The quiet drifter was gone. In his place stood someone else, a man radiating cold competence. "Flint," he called, his voice not loud but carrying absolute authority that stopped Flint cold. "Who in blazes are you?" Flint demanded, startled by this new, dangerous variable. Cole ignored him. "Let the woman go. Let the sheriff be tended. Bailey's your business, not theirs." He positioned himself expertly, using the saloon corner for cover. His stance, his grip, the way his eyes calculated angles, it spoke of battles fought and won. "Kincaid prefers quiet collections," Cole stated, his knowledge of their boss clearly shaking Flint. "Massacres draw marshals. Bad for business." Flint hesitated. This scarred stranger knew Kincaid. He spoke with unnerving certainty. And the plain woman, she was working on the sheriff with impossible calm. The equation had changed. It wasn't just 3 guns against a scared town. It was 3 guns against a woman with unexpected skill and a man who looked like death waiting to happen. Across the deadly space, Cole and Clara locked eyes, a fleeting, grim understanding. The underestimated, the overlooked, were now Redemption Creek's only defense. The street became a tableau of frozen tension. Flint stared hard at Cole, then at Clara coolly tending the sheriff, then back at the pathetic lump behind the counter that was Arthur Bailey. Cole's mention of Kincaid and Marshall's resonated. This wasn't supposed to get bloody. All right, stranger. Flint conceded, trying to salvage control. Just Bailey. We take him. Settle the debt. Nobody else interferes. Nobody else gets hurt. He signaled his men to lower their weapons slightly, but keep Amelia covered. Bailey stays. Cole countered, his voice inflexible. His choices, his consequences. You try taking him by force. You deal with me first. And maybe more than just me. His gaze flickered towards the shuttered windows lining the street. What's he to you? Flint sneered. Nothing, Cole said, the word sharp. But this town pays its own debts, not his. Kincaid sent you to collect, not start a war. Again the name, the implication. Cole knew their operations, unsettled Flint. Inside the sheriff's office, Clara directed the now mobilized deputy. Pressure here. Keep it steady. Her calm was an anchor. Suddenly, Arthur saw his chance. While Flint was focused on Cole, he scrambled up and bolted for the mercantile's back door. He's running, yelled one of Flint's men. Flint roared in fury. Get him. The man holding Amelia shoved her roughly aside. She fell, crying out, and sprinted after Arthur. The third man raised his rifle towards the back of the store. Cole's reaction was lightning fast. His Colt barked once. Not a killing shot, but one of surgical precision. It struck the rifleman's weapon, ripping it from his grasp with a splintering crack. The man screamed, clutching his numbed hand. Seeing Arthur's cowardice, seeing Amelia thrown down, something ignited in the hidden townsfolk. Peterson, the blacksmith, emerged swinging a heavy hammer. Others appeared, ranchers with Winchesters, shopkeepers with shotguns. Fear had turned to anger. Flint saw it instantly. The odds had irrevocably shifted. 1 man injured, the town suddenly armed and hostile, and the deadly stranger holding the center. He made the call. Horses. Now. He glared towards the back of the mercantile. This ain't finished, Bailey. Kincaid will hear. Then, fixing Cole with a hate-filled stare. And you, will remember you. They grabbed their injured comrade, mounted, and spurred their horses out of town, vanishing into the dust as quickly as they'd arrived. Silence descended, broken only by Amelia's sobbing and the sheriff's pained groans. The townsfolk slowly lowered their weapons, breathing hard, staring at Cole, who calmly holstered his weapon, his face reverting to impassivity, though the coiled energy remained. Their gaze then shifted to Clara, finishing her bandaging, her face smudged but resolute. Arthur Bailey was found later, cowering in his own cellar amidst sacks of potatoes, babbling incoherent excuses. His disgrace was absolute and public. He hadn't just failed. He'd actively endangered everyone through his greed and cowardice. The confrontation ended not in a hail of bullets, but in the stark revelation of character. Cole, the silent watcher, had become the unexpected shield. Clara, the plain reject, had become the vital healer. And Arthur Bailey stood exposed as nothing more than a hollow man. In the quiet days that followed, Redemption Creek began to heal, changed by the fire it had passed through. Arthur Bailey vanished, leaving his shuttered mercantile as a monument to his disgrace. Amelia Holloway, her illusions shattered, took the first stage east. Mr. Harrison, appalled, settled Arthur's legitimate debts and put the store under new, honest management. Sheriff Brody, recovering steadily, never tired of telling how Clara's swift action saved him. The whispers about her plainness died out, replaced by murmurs of respect for her courage and skill. Mrs. Gable brought fresh bread. her apology unspoken but clear in her eyes. Doors that were once closed now opened with quiet acknowledgment. Clara accepted it all with the same steady grace she'd shown under scorn, continuing her work, but no longer invisible. She had carved her place, not with beauty, but with undeniable substance. Cole stayed on. His anonymity was gone, replaced by speculation and cautious respect. Was he a lawman? A bounty hunter? He offered no answers, but his presence lent a subtle security to the town. He remained quiet, watchful, but the townsfolk now saw the steel beneath the scars. He and Clara didn't rush into anything. Their bond was forged in crisis, understood in silence. An occasional nod across the street, a shared glance that held more meaning than hours of conversation. He might linger near Mrs. Albright's fence line as she worked, his gaze resting on her for a moment longer than casual observation required. She might look up from her sewing, sensing his presence even when he seemed focused on the distant hills. One evening, the sky painted in fiery hues, Cole approached Clara as she sat on her cabin steps, mending in the last light. He stopped before her, holding a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. Silence stretched between them, comfortable, familiar. He held it out. "For the sheriff," he said, his voice low. "Might help." Clara unwrapped it. Inside was a tin of potent medical salve, expensive and rare. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. The usual guard was lowered, revealing something warmer beneath. "Thank you, Cole. You handled yourself well back there, Clara," he stated simply. "Very well." It wasn't flowery praise. It was a statement of fact, delivered with quiet respect. A hard-won acknowledgement between two people who understood survival, who saw beyond the surface. The scarred cowboy and the plain woman. In the vast, unforgiving landscape of the West, they stood as testament to hidden strengths and unexpected connections. The trail ahead remained uncertain, but perhaps, finally, neither of them would have to walk it entirely alone. Redemption, it seemed, could be found even in the dust of a town that had almost forgotten its name.